Welcome to another episode of It's Not What You Think. This week, we're going to explore the sounds of birds. This week's t-shirt is Fat Bottom Girls, You Make the Flocking World Go Round. My sister gave me this one because she knows I'm a Queen fan, and hopefully you get the Queen reference.
Fat bottom girls, you make the rockin' world go round.
So we're going to wear this shirt as a way to say thank you for the duration of this episode. So we're exploring the sounds of living creatures. We did an episode with bugs or insect sounds. We did an episode with whale sounds or whale songs. And now we're going to explore bird sounds and bird songs. And I thought it was really interesting. Someone once said, generally people don't like atonal music, but bird songs are atonal music. Now, if you're not sure what atonal music is, it's kind of tricky to describe. I think it's easier to try and define tonal music, and then atonal music will be its opposite. Tonal music is the organization of sound around a focal point. It's really tricky to describe. That's kind of the best I can do at the top of my head. And so atonal music will be music that doesn't revolve around a particular center. In other words, it's kind of random and kind of chaotic. And that's why it's kind of tricky to listen to composed atonal music. But bird songs are very beautiful, and bird songs are atonal music in that they don't revolve around a particular tonal center. And so atonal music can be very beautiful. And once again, we have that quality of nature that seems to gravitate towards white noise with the crashing sounds of the ocean and the wind, and atonal music with bird songs and whale songs and songs of living creatures. So let's listen to some bird songs. There have been a few attempts to play musical instruments with a bird and get the birds to respond, sort of as a co-composer. The highlights would include Jim Nolman. In 1982, he came out with an album called Playing Music with Animals. And on this one track, he plays a flute to 300 turkeys. remember David Rothenberg from previous episodes, he really has his career synced into communicating and playing music with animals and other uh, and birds. He came out with a book in 2005 called Why Birds Sing, and he has an accompanying CD in which he plays a flute to birds and interacts with the birds, and it's a very beautiful track. There are different ways to interact with birds. I think the most obvious way is to play a musical instrument to the birds and hope that you stimulate a response from them, and you kind of go back and forth, kind of like you're in a band and the bird is part of your band. Um, there's a French composer, and I'm only going to pronounce his first name because I know I'll botch up his last name. His first name is Celeste, and he has a museum exhibit where he takes several electric guitars and puts them on their sides and has birds flying around the room, and eventually some of them will land on the neck of the guitar, and due to the nature of the pickups, when they land they create the electric guitar sound. And so theoretically the birds are composing experimental music. He has I'll show you a video clip because it's really interesting to see. It's one of those things where you would love to go and see it and participate in it, but I'm not sure if you would love to listen to the album at home. Or you probably would love to listen to the album at home after you went to the museum because it would stimulate those memories and emotions of going to the museum. But if you just had in your collection the recording of the museum piece, it might not be as fun. You might not have as much appreciation for it. So let's do a little bit of both. I'll show you the video clip so you can see the museum piece where he has I think like 10 or a dozen electric guitars and like 300 birds flying around the room and landing on the guitars. And then we'll just listen to the a selection from his album without the visuals and do a little compare and contrast. The soundtrack wasn't as difficult to listen to as I thought. It was kind of pleasing, and I hope you enjoyed it. Um, let's move on to Paul Winter. Paul Winter is an American saxophonist, composer, and band leader, and he dedicated a good portion of his career playing to animals and taking recorded sounds of animals and integrating them into his pieces. He's got an album. We're going to check out an album called Common Ground. And in this particular piece, you can distinctly hear the sounds of a bald eagle. Having recorded bird songs in a piece of music spans a variety of genres of music, from classical music to rock and roll music. Um, Pink Floyd, they use a lot of various sounds in their music. Um, the cash register, the famous cash register of money, and they have a lesser known album, and I think it's a soundtrack. And this album's called More, and it features bird sounds in one of their tracks.
In a churchyard by a river, blazing in the haze of midday, laughing in the grasses and the graves. Yellow bird, you are not long in singing and in flying on, in laughing and in leaving. Willow weeping in the water, waving to the river daughters, swaying in the ripples and the reeds.
Beaver and Krause. Not necessarily household names, but they're a musical duo who came out of Los Angeles in the 60s and pioneered some electronic music. One of their albums, In a Wild Sanctuary, just as the title sounds, it's going to feature some bird music. Some bird sounds. Bird music, bird sounds. Now, psychedelic music like Pink Floyd, electronic music of the 60s, Beaver and Krause, I'm probably not surprising you that they use bird sounds. But what about classical music? Like, when you think of classical music, you think of Beethoven and Mozart. There's a Italian composer named Arturo Respighi, and in his piece called The Pines of Rome, he uses a recording of a nightingale. still yet, British composer Jonathan Harvey wrote a bird concerto with piano song. It's not a piano concerto with bird song. That's pretty clever. He wrote a bird concerto with piano song, and it features tape recorded bird. So as recent as 1972, Finnish composer Rautavar, and I could not pronounce his first name, trust me, he wrote a concerto for birds and orchestra. And it says here, he himself set off with a tape recorder to roam around the marshlands of the north, and it was from the birds of the Arctic that he selected the soloists for this concerto. So this is a real intense piece of music. It's a whole concerto with tape recorded birds. And it says in this, for this recording, the composer's revised tape recording had been used. staying in Finland, there's another composer. Let's try his name out. His first name is Petri. Got that right. His last name Kuljun Tost. I hope I did his name justice. Petri Kuljun Tost. He's a Finnish composer of electronic music, and he put out an album called Wings. And he has a similar approach, taking recordings of birds, but instead of just putting them into the song, dropping them into the song, he manipulates the sounds of the birds so they start off being recognizable and then they're just something completely different. So they end up morphing into brand new created sounds. Okay, this episode is really stretching my bounds of how to pronounce names, putting me up to the challenge. Because the next composer is a French composer of contemporary music, Francois Bernard Maché. I hope I did his name justice, and I apologize if I butchered it. He has a piece. Oh, what's the name of this piece? Arg. He has a piece called Sopiana. Again, I hope I even got that simple word pronounced correctly. In it, he uses tape-recorded bird songs, and what he does with the orchestra, I just think is really cool. He basically just imitates the bird songs. What you'll hear is you'll hear the birds, and they'll create a melody, and then the orchestra repeats the melody back. And in a way, it's almost like the birds are teaching the composer how to sing in birdsong. Now, if you just like that, you're going to like this as well, because Kate Bush does practically the same thing, except instead of an orchestra behind her, she just uses her voice, and so she has the birds sing, and she repeats it and vocalizes what the birds sing, and you get an effect that the birds are teaching her how to sing like birds or sing bird songs. So we're ending this episode, the exploration of birds and bird songs into composed music with imitation. We go from the actual interaction and recording of the birds to just dropping in recordings of bird songs into a piece of music, and now the natural progression is orchestras and composers imitate birds in their musical instruments. And there's two that come to mind. There's just a plethora of examples from Mozart to the guy who starts with a Z. But there's two I want to bring to our attention. Heinrich Biba, he's an Austrian composer and violinist. His last name, I had to look it up on how to pronounce it because it's too tempting to make it sound like Justin Bieber. But he's an Austrian composer, and therefore his last name is Biba, and that's how you pronounce it. He has composed a representative sonata in which he imitates various animals, and one of them, of course, is the nightingale, a bird. And let's listen to the, it's section 2 of the Representativa Sonata, the Nightingale. And I want to close this episode with just one of my all-time favorites. Adrian Belew is imitating the sounds of seagull in the King Crimson song Mate Kudasai.